Hello, and welcome to Khyber Shards, a 5th edition actual play show set in the Eberron campaign world. It is Friday, and so we have a Khyber Shards Answers featuring Casey. Hi, Casey.
Hello.
So we're obviously in the middle, very much in the middle of the crazy. Our last episode ends with Ari going unconscious.
Like
everybody else is still down on the train, and so Lucan is alone on the ship with Mina, Cal, and Malcolm, and Sam, and that's where we are. And the party has not yet figured out how they're going to get back on the ship, which is absolutely hilarious. So, yes, this is very, very chaotic, and very in the middle of it. So,
Fun.
It is. It's a fun. Yes, I enjoyed everything about this combat. It was such fun chaos. And we have some questions about things that might have happened this past episode for you. But Darren began by asking if I had ever tried any house rules for handling opposed roles between player characters. Yeah, it's difficult because Ari is obviously not acting in the best interest of the party for a chunk of the episode here, and you have Ezri, who's very insightful, trying to figure out what's going on with Ari, and that makes a lot of sense. I think RA did a really good job of suppressing his personal player suspicions until he had a justification for Ezri to start asking questions. That's so hard to do.
It is.
When you know that something's up, but can't really say that your character would. Even when you play a character who's pretty insightful, and so that helps. But still, that's so hard to do, and I think RA did an amazing job of holding back. In the same way that Eric does an amazing job going in the opposite direction of just leaning into, oh, I've been charmed. All right.
Guess we're helping him now.
Yeah. So that is very tricky. And it doesn't get less tricky as things go on from here. Exactly. There's a point, and I don't necessarily have a hard way to define, or an easy way to define what the point is, but there's definitely a point at which a player character is acting so counter to the party's goals and interests that you're just essentially playing player versus player. Some groups don't mind that, and some groups find it extremely stressful, and some players within some groups find it extremely stressful and so it's, Eric and I would bet RA probably would be okay with it to a certain degree. I would bet you would find it very stressful. I don't know where Colin would find, because we haven't found ourselves in that position with Colin. I tend to find it pretty stressful as a player, and very stressful as a GM, because I'm worried. Okay, is everyone okay where we are? And so I would say there's a point where you get to feeling that way, that what you probably need to do is just pause and make sure, okay, everybody cool with where we are, and just do a check-in with your players, which is obviously easier if you play mainly with friends. But I would say that's probably what you need to do. But there's a point also where a player character, especially when a player character is not willingly operating, in the way that Ari is not willingly operating, where Ari would essentially need to, we could get to a point where Ari would essentially need to become temporarily an NPC, because at a certain point Ari is becoming part of the narrative resistance to the players, and player characters just aren't built to be run that way, and so you would need, I think, to remove Eric from that equation and let Eric play something else temporarily, let him be on the side of the PCs again, because that's a lot of the fun. Or else, I mean, depending on what your group's like, remove that player character entirely from the game and let them play in the background separately, something like that. There's a lot of different ways depending on the circumstances. And in Ari's circumstances here, if Ari being charmed were to take Ari completely off course from the other players, if he and Lucan, obviously Ari's unconscious at the end of our most recent episode, so we didn't get here, but if Lucan had charmed Ari and they had managed to completely escape, then Ari's not with the party right now, and Eric needs to be able to play something else for a while. So there's points at which it becomes, I think, a bad idea to let the player continue. And I don't like combat between players, and I'm really glad that Eric didn't go the simple route of just turning around and attacking Ezri or something like that. I like that Eric made it, okay, it's going to be, I'm not an enemy to my party, it's about escaping. And so I like the way that Eric played that. I think that's a smart way to play it when you find yourself in that position, because player character attacks can be really powerful, and you definitely don't want to be responsible for, killing one of the party or something like that. That's not going to leave anyone feeling good. So I don't have any house rules. If you've got a favorite house rule for how you handle that, let me know in the comments below. But the way that we ran it was the opposed role. And I think with this kind of situation, it's not a bad thing because everybody knows what's going on. I think if you get a situation where a player character has decided secretly or whatever to work against the party and is making rolls against the party, that can ruin the fun a lot faster than what we have here, where everyone saw Ari get charmed, everyone knows what's going on, everyone knows that Eric is just abiding by the rules of the situation.
Right.
And so I think that's kind of the difference here from an actual player who's working in opposition to the party, which I don't like generally. Maybe in very short term for very specific reasons, but on the whole, I don't much like that. And then Emily asks a question for both of us: our favorite vampire media. It's What We Do in the Shadows. What We Do in the Shadows is my favorite vampire media.
I have never seen that.
You really haven't? Oh,
I haven't.
So funny.
You are not the only person to have said that. It has been highly recommended. I just have not started it.
You and I think RA would both really like it. It's very fun.
Okay. Add it to the list. I don't know. The vampire media that I've consumed the most is probably Buffy or True Blood.
Mm-hmm.
I would not say True Blood is good vampire media. But I have in fact watched it. And Buffy obviously is fantastic. But I did not get into Buffy until much later, and then binged all of it. But
nice.
What is it called? Interview with a Vampire was...
Oh, yeah.
That's a good movie.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That's a good movie.
There's a new adaptation coming out, right? There's a TV series coming out?
Right. I think it's a series, yeah.
Yeah.
I have not seen it, but...
I haven't either. But yes, no, that is a very good movie. It is very well done. Laura. Oh, Laura assumes that mine is Twilight. Laura asks, how do you think Shade would do as a vampire?
I think she'd kill it, man. Haha. Sorry. I think she'd be a really good vampire. She's very sneaky. She's very comfortable living on her own. I think that she'd be a great vampire and successfully eat.
I mean, that makes a lot of sense. Shade as a predator is very easy to
Right.
believe.
I think it would work with her skill set very well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Shade would be a very dangerous vampire.
Sorry.
Laura also wants to know, on the other hand, what made Shade wait so long before deciding that Demise needed to be stopped?
I feel like maybe Philip also asked this question as we were playing the game. Shade has people in two categories. Yes and no. Essentially. And so Demise remained in the yes category for a while for a couple of reasons. One, Ezri said so. Shade feels extreme loyalty to Ezri, particularly with his deaths, and everybody's willingness to go on Shade's quest so many moons ago. That feels like so long ago now. That anything they want done, she feels a not just a desire to help them, but almost an obligation to help them to pursue their side quests, for lack of a better term.
Sure.
And so Ezri said, we will trust her. Okay, sure. Ezri spoke for her. Secondly, Demise seems to have connections, and Shade is in a position in which she is trying to navigate how to gain power and what that looks like. Maybe Demise is a way to do that. And so kept Demise in that yes category for that reason as well. And Shade doesn't have a problem with violence as a means to an end. And so when Demise wants to use violence, that isn't necessarily let's shift her to the no category for right. Shade. Unfortunately, it wasn't until Demise's use of violence was inconsistent with the way that Shade would have used it. She said distraction. Shade's in for a good distraction. Great. But the people being attacked weren't quote unquote bad people. And I say that quote unquote because Shade views her ability to judge whether or not people are recipients of violence. And not that she's a good judge, but she does have a line somewhere in there. And these were innocent bystanders that Demise was willing to sacrifice. Okay. No, Shade knows that's a line.
Mm-hmm.
At the very least, Arya would have been upset.
True. And if you were to multi-class Shade, what other classes do you think you would take?
Oh. What other classes would I take? Let's see. What is she now?
Ranger.
She's a ranger, right? Probably rogue. Just up that sneakiness aspect of her to so probably rogue.
That makes sense. Excuse me.
That's why I asked. I keep forgetting if she's my ranger or my rogue.
Right. Yeah, that's true. In Arhamgam, you are a rogue. Yeah, I figured rogue. It would require some sort of narrative shift, but I could also imagine Shade leaning towards some kind of druid. getting more in touch with the nature magic.
Absolutely. That is one of the classes that I first considered for Shade.
Oh, really? Okay.
I did. This was a question asked, I think, on the last KSA where it was all of us. They asked about other classes. And my mind went blank, which was part of my reason my answer was like, no. Just lost any ability to think in that moment. But Druid is something that I had considered, and why I went with Ranger, because I could pick Druid spells.
Yes.
It was a player choice rather than a character choice to not do Druid, and it was honestly just the number of spells that I would have to manage would have been overwhelming for me personally while being recorded.
Yeah.
But yes, Druid would fit the character very, very well.
Darren asks, how does it feel to play through an arc that takes place outside of Stormreach?
A little discombobulating. As a player, my strength is not understanding the world. That is not something I'm great at. And I ask poor Philip, you get the same questions sometimes. And so I feel like I'm getting to understand Stormreach. As a player, I'm getting there. And so leaving this world was like, okay, I don't understand anything. It's fine. I will play in it, but I worry that I'm making choices that would be inconsistent with that if I had better understood or do better understand the regions that we're actually visiting and going to. I trust you and I trust the other players enough that if I made a grave mistake that like, no, you have before stepped in and you have before stepped in and said, well, Shade would know that. And so I appreciate that. I very much appreciate that from you. But I do worry as a player that I will mess up the less I understand the world that I'm playing in, and stepping outside of Stormreach. Yeah, Stormreach. I'm pretty unfamiliar with it.
I think though that it doesn't end up coming across that way much, mainly because Shade also wouldn't have any understanding of Zilargo or really anywhere other than maybe the Eldeen Reaches. Like if we were to do an arc back in the Eldeen Reaches, I'd probably give you a bunch of information just so that you would have a solid idea of what Shade knows about that region. But based on the backstory, Shade's been in the Eldeen Reaches, and then she was in the Blackwheel program, and then there was a really unpleasant trip across Corvair, and now she lives in Stormreach. So it works. It fits that Shade wouldn't have any idea of Zilargo and the Trust and all that politicking. Makes a lot of sense. So I don't think it comes across as you not understanding the world. I think it comes across as you playing an outsider character, and it works because you are playing an outsider character.
I do often choose outsider characters to play for a similar reason. That if I, the player, don't understand something about that world, then it doesn't break the game. That would be giving myself a lot of power, but I do worry about messing up other people's fun. And so particularly for you and for Eric, who know this world so well, I wouldn't want to mess that up, but
I can assure you that you don't.
Thanks.
I have the opposite situation in that I just absorb lore. It's the thing that I do. It's why I teach history. I'm just teaching lore. And so I know Eberron really, really well. And so I have a tendency to try and play characters who have an excuse to be well-educated and worldly. And so because it's very hard for me to not make use of the knowledge about the world
Makes sense.
from the
Absolutely.
other direction. And so I don't want to, Eric obviously knew a lot of things about the Mark of Death when we introduced it, and he's done a great job of pretending Ari doesn't.
Yes.
And so, things like that are where it gets tricky when you know the world really well. So in a lot of ways, as a DM, it's a lot of fun having players who don't know the world super well a lot of the time, because it means that you and RA and Colin, you don't know who any of the classic Eberron bad guys are or the classic Eberron plots and things like that. So I can use those things in a way that will actually surprise you. It won't just be, for Eric, it's the fun is like, how is Philip going to use this plot? But you and Colin and RA are entirely in the dark, and so I get to actually catch you off guard with those things. And that is actually a lot of fun to have players who don't know the the big chunk of the setting book that's really just for the DM. Setting books used to have that, where rule books is there'd be a couple of chapters at the beginning, and then there'd be this big page that says, if you are a player, do not read past this page. I kind of wish more of them had that. That's a useful little compartmentalization.
Right. It has been fun as a player to be able to be surprised in that way. And it's very funny because we'll see Eric react to something that, I didn't know was a thing, but he knows something's coming. And so it definitely adds to the suspense of the situation. Every now and then I sometimes forget I'm a player and become an audience member. And I'm like, ooh, this is a good story. Like, that sounds so vain, but just, the unfolding of Ari's story with the Forgotten Prince and the unfolding of Ezri's story with the Mark of Death. It just, every now and then it's, oh, right, I'm a part of this. Yeah. Okay. Participate.
I'm glad. Emily inquires if, in the darkest timeline, Lucan and or a charmed Ari had killed Cal, and Shade, for some reason, wasn't able to get him resurrected. What kind of animal companion would you seek out as a replacement? Or would Shade's loyalty to Cal be enough, to her dead friend, to be enough for you to switch subclasses because she doesn't want to replace Cal with a new animal? The number of reaction emojis on this question on our Discord is absolutely hilarious.
I had that thought when Ari bamfed them up to the ship and Cal was there. And I didn't make it past that thought. Just the fear of... because as a player, I was like, what if charmed Ari harms Cal and I have to find a way to continue playing with Eric? And obviously, I would be professional and continue playing with him, but I struggled with how would Shade navigate that. So good question. And I don't know how Shade would recover from losing Cal, much less if it is Ari that harms him.
Right.
As far as I almost said replacement pet, and I can't. Oof. As far as another animal companion, I think Shade would get another animal companion, and definitely not view it as replacing Cal, but she feels more at home with with creatures than she does with people.
Sure.
And so I could see her befriending another animal continue on. As far as what companion I would want, I love fae creatures. I just love the mythical aspect of something, that's why we play RPGs, right? Is to live in worlds and have companions that you can't have in the real world. I mentioned very, very early on that you, Philip, had sent me a list of suggested. Can y'all hear Vash in the background making noises, or is my noise gate blocking him? Oh my goodness. He would definitely like some attention. He's just whining right back there. Can't see him. So there was a mystical horse that you sent.
Mm-hmm.
And that was a close runner up, but probably some type of very cool predator.
Cool.
I think is what I would get after a long mourning period.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely.
And fights.
And fights. And then Mia asks, what made you choose to have Shade attack Demise? That was a really funny moment. Like, that was such a funny moment because it was just, can you get us up there? No. Okay, stab. And it was just...
it was very, very much Shade's processing. Are you of use to me anymore? No, you are not. Okay. And the reason for the attack was just her frustration in that moment. Ari had put across the communicator the situation that he was in, or at least his feelings about the situation he was in. And Shade obviously wants to protect her companions. That's her family, and that's what you do for family, is you put yourself in danger for them. And then to not be able to do that, she really struggled with the next steps, and Shade's processing of difficult emotion when it's not, chit-chatting with her friends, is violence. I'm mad and I will lash out. And so she was overwhelmed in that moment. How can I help him? I can't. You are the Demise, not you, Philip. Demise was the person who wasn't in her yes category at that moment. And so she received the brunt of that frustration and anger and fear. So if she could have gotten them up to the ship, Shade would have delayed her attack, but no use.
Assuming Demise would take you with her when she went up to the ship.
Oh, I mean,
right.
Player character, yes, recognizes that her being able to get to them to the ship does not equal Shade getting to the ship.
Right. Oh, that's cool. Yeah.
Sorry, not player character. Player character, not thinking straight.
Sure. Of course. How would one think straight given the absurd level of chaos in that moment? Like, yeah. No,
how did you navigate the chaos of that scene?
So I mean, I knew immediately that if, like, it's in my notes that if Lucan can get one of the player characters isolated, he will try to charm them. Vampire charm is like charm person on steroids. It's you get one roll, it lasts 24 hours.
Whoa.
Like, you turn that person into your minion. And it's not like, suggestion where it's they'll carry out a task. It's that person is in your thrall. So it's like a much more powerful form of charm person. It's not even just they see you as an ally. It's more intense, and so it's very powerful, and it's it's one of the things that if you've got a vampire, you've got it. That's the big swing you can take. That it was Ari. If it was like Pog or Shade, then what would happen would be obvious. He would turn them against the party as a combatant. Ari, while he can be very effective as a damage dealer, as a warlock, but Ari's main thing is that Ari is socially brilliant. Ari has all the deception, all the disguise, all the things, and so seeing it's Ari, getting control of Ari, and Ari obviously being a magic user, it's okay. I'm going to get up to the ship and I'm going to take the ship. That's Lucan's intention when he takes Ari, and once he's got Ari up to the ship, Ari is, kind of, well, to use Shay's logic, not of use to him as much anymore. And so I'll get some healing off of you, ditch you, take the ship. And so so I knew what Lucan's plan would be if he got alone. I didn't expect him to get one of you alone, but I knew that's what he would do if he got you alone. And I knew I had kind of written out notes of what each of the other players who's trying to get the sword does round 1, round 2, round 3, round 4. I knew what Demise would try to do. I knew what the mystery person with the fabulous hair would try to do. And a lot of that ended up happening off stage because you guys were effectively stopped in place fighting the skeletons for a long time. And Ari and Ezri, being separated from you guys initially, came in very late into the thing. And so there were other things that happened further up in the train that drove Lucan up onto the roof, that, and so I had the movements kind of choreographed out, and it was just a matter of if the players get in the way of those movements, then that's where things start to branch and change. And so having that helped a lot. And I did that with a lot of the encounters in this, because the encounters in this adventure are so chaotic in nature. For both this and the ballroom scene, I did have round by round, this is what these characters will do. So I basically plotted these out. Let's imagine the player characters aren't here. Here are the things that would happen. And it's just a matter of the player characters inserting themselves in.
Okay.
Which is not usually the detail in which I plan an encounter out. Usually my encounters are a lot more freeform, but because there are so many moving parts to this one, I needed not to have to sit and think about what each party's moves were. And obviously Ari taking Lucan off the train was not in my thing. I had forgotten Ari had that spell.
Okay.
So yeah, that was not expected as an option. But it's cool.
In that moment, like, is it exciting or is it, oh, okay, shift?
It's a little of both. It's mostly exciting, but there is definitely a little bit of, oh, cool, now everybody on the ship is also a part of this encounter. So now there's also, what does Mina do? What does Malcolm do? Cal's up there, right. And I also am terrified of the idea of killing Cal. And so, and also it's okay, Ari's up there, Lucan's there, Mina's there. Mina's not very high level as an NPC, but she has some options that could really just smoke Ari in this situation, especially given how beat up Ari already was by that point. And so how much do I pour on? Do I really want Ari dead right now? And
right now.
so yeah, you get yourself into a situation where it's, I don't want to go easy, especially not on Eric. Eric and I have an understanding. We DM for each other quite a bit, and both of us feel frustration when we feel like the other one is playing soft with our characters. And so Eric and I have an understanding that we play it straight. We play it the way the encounter would go. And so I didn't really feel bad at all of having Lucan just wail on Ari with a really powerful magic weapon and then drain his blood. Like that was what would happen. That was that's what happens when you go face to face solo with a vampire. And
right.
The only thing I did in that particular moment was I just decided, I think Mina would just freak out. I think at least for a few rounds, Mina would just freak out. And that wasn't so much to avoid using her against Ari as it was, I don't also want to track Mina right now. Mm. There are enough moving pieces on the board. I don't also want to track Mina right at this moment. And so that's kind of part of it. The other nice thing about this, while it seems very chaotic, the other nice thing is if for some reason you guys are having a really easy time with it, which obviously that's not how this has played out, but if it had happened that you guys just smoked your way through the skeletons or took Demise down in a really rapid fashion, there are other players on the board that I can bring in to keep the encounter interesting, to adjust it. And if it's going the opposite direction, well, maybe something delays their entry into this scene in order to allow this to be challenging, but not just overwhelming in the number of things happening at once. Because you also don't want to end up, if you can avoid it, you don't want to end up with like a 4-way combat happening all at once, because it's just going to make things move very slowly in a turn-based combat. But it feels really cool. It feels very cinematic, but it is very difficult. And this sort of thing happened in a game that Eric ran where I was a player, where it's a murder mystery on an airship. And
cool.
There's a bunch of different factions and a bunch of different encounters that can trigger at various points. And in one session, we had spent a bunch of sessions investigating, trying to find things out. And in one session, we triggered every single combat encounter at once with our characters spread all across the ship. One of our player characters found a bomb on the ship and began trying to defuse it. One of our player characters stumbled onto a fight that had started. One of our player characters started a fight. And so Eric was running at various points on the ship, I think 4 different encounters happening at once, and not even all in the same place, spread across the ship. And so that's absolutely the peak D&D chaos I've ever seen. It was immensely fun, and Eric did a great job with it, but that's absolutely the most insanity. And so compared to something like that, the big advantage here is at least this fight is more or less contained. We're all on the train together until Ari takes Lucan off the train. But we're all on the train together, and so even though there are a lot of things going on, they're all happening in roughly the same place. So no, it is a lot of fun. The chaos is fun because that's the moment where, this story is doing something I didn't expect it to do. So let's see where we're going. So that, it is fun. It tests the improvisation. This is the only part of my life where I'm any good at improvisation. I'm I was a
Really?
terrible. Yeah, when I was doing theater stuff in college, improv, I'm terrible at it. Like the idea of just standing up and acting out a scene um, is terrible. The advantage here is all I need is just it's my imagination and my voice. I can do those things, but the idea of also acting while I'm doing it is something I just never got comfortable with. So this is
That's so
like a
interesting.
very weird niche area where I'm very good at improv.
I absolutely would have expected those to go hand in hand. Being good at this, because you are so good at improvising a scene when we throw something completely random at you.
Yeah. No. Anytime we did like improv games to warm up for a rehearsal or something like that, I'm miserable at it. I need a script.
I am not laughing at you. I am also
No,
terrible at that. I had to take an acting class, and they love to do improv.
They do. They do. I don't understand why. When we do a play, we're not improvising.
Right.
Oh my. Anyway. Well, that brings us to the conclusion of our questions. Thank you all so much for submitting the questions. If you'd like to submit questions, you can do so in comments or over on our Discord, the link to which is down below, along with all of our other social media and our merch store and our coffee and all the other things down there. So please feel free to get in touch with us. Hit that like and subscribe button. New episodes of Khyber Shards every Monday. New Khyber Shards answers every Friday. And until next time, thanks for rolling with us.